Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Cabinet this Wednesday. Let's get cracking. There's quite a few items on the agenda. I don't believe we have any apologies for absence. Nick, I can see everyone. Welcome, Councillor Maybe, Councillor Callard and Councillor Chandler online. Do we have any declarations of interest? Let's move quickly then to item 3, the petition to reinstate Monmouth Night Shelter at Monmouth Market Hall under the management of churches in Monmouth. I believe that's for you, Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, thanks very much. Colleagues will recall that the churches of Monmouth have put a petition initially to the Place Scrutiny Committee, and it was considered at that scrutiny committee who referred the petition to full council. I was able to make a statement to full council in response to that, and a debate ensued. The recommendation before us today is to agree the action that I proposed in full council, which is for the council to work together with churches in Monmouth to find suitable accommodation and provide support to homeless people in Monmouth. I can report to colleagues that I've attended an online meeting, a Teams meeting, with representatives of the churches in Monmouth. I quickly concluded during that meeting that the mechanism of a Teams meeting was not well suited to developing the sort of relationship that I think that we want with churches in Monmouth. And therefore tomorrow, both myself and the leader of the council and our relevant officers will meet with churches in Monmouth at the Priory in Monmouth to find ways forward to establish a working relationship to achieve our shared objectives, which is providing both accommodation and support for homeless people in Monmouth. The background, which is there in the report, and we should be very grateful, is that during COVID, churches in Monmouth provided a refuge facility at the Market Hall in Monmouth. That came to an end, in part because the Estates Department, Monmouthshire County Council, had found other uses for that building, and also because, as I said in full council, it was the policy of the council, the policy of Welsh Government, that we should be seeking temporary accommodation for homeless people in the county. Having said that, there is a gap in the provision of temporary accommodation. What we have tends to be focused on the town of Chepstow, and there have been cases where homeless people in Monmouth have been offered temporary accommodation in Chepstow. Some have found that appropriate, but others have not. And I regard it as an urgent need for us to identify and acquire the accommodation that is needed in Monmouth town itself. And when we meet with churches in Monmouth tomorrow, I will be asking that we work together in finding such accommodation. Whatever accommodation and whenever that accommodation is found, homeless people, however accommodated, will in many cases require support in addition to their homes, in addition to the accommodation itself. And I'm convinced that that is very often provided by a partnership between specialist organisations such as Llamais, the council and volunteers in our towns and villages. And I want to work with the churches in Monmouth, not just at tomorrow's meeting, but have develop an ongoing relationship to find ways in which their much valued volunteer effort can find its place in providing the support that homeless people need. Following that meeting tomorrow and following other meetings.
How are things?
Will, I think you need to mute yourself.
Following that meeting tomorrow, and I think it should be a first of a number of meetings, I will compile a report back to the place scrutiny committee to report the partnership that I hope we develop and the progress that I hope we make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. As you said, I will be joining the meeting tomorrow. I very much look forward to that conversation that you are developing with the Monmouth churches acting together. Councillors, is there any observation or questions you'd like to ask? If not, I know Councillor John. Welcome, Councillor John. I know you have a question.
I do. Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. Really pleased to hear of the progress. So thank you for that, Councillor Griffiths, and pleased to hear you've got a meeting tomorrow. My group very happy to help in whatever way we can. Can I ask further to the letting agreement that's referred to in point 4.5 of the report? Can you tell us when that letting was agreed, please?
The letting agreement has been in place since June of this year. So it's been let since June of this year. I've asked myself a supplementary question, are we making use of that letting? And the answer I'm getting is that they have prepared a change of use planning application. They're making use at intervals. They're paying rent, there is a remit agreement, but they're preparing, if you like, for full-time occupation in due course, but they are on site and on the premises.
Right. Okay.
I'd also like to say in response to your question, Councillor John, I very much, you referred to your group, I very much put on record my appreciation for the contribution of Councillor Louise Brown, who works with the churches in Monmouth, and is a useful conduit, if you like. I'm not sure that's the right word, partner in the relationship that I want to build with this group.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor John. I'd also like to echo thank you for offering the services and collaboration of your group over and above Councillor Brown, who I know it's been an important part of allowing this dialogue to continue. So thank you. We have two recommendations to consider the petition and to agree the action proposed by Councillor Griffiths as Cabinet Member of Planning and Economic Development, which is to establish how we work together. Do I have your agreement, Cabinet?
Yep.
That's carried. So let's move on to item 4, Public Health Wales Act 2017, Special Procedures Licensing. Councillor Sandals.
Thank you, Leader. The Public Health Wales Act 2017 received royal assent on the 3rd of July 2017. This means that premises, vehicles and those individuals operating in the field of tattooing, including semi-permanent makeup, body piercing, electrolysis and acupuncture, which includes dry needling, will now be required to obtain a licence. And this comes into force on the 29th of November 2024. This report today requests the setting of the fees and delegation of powers to enable the processing of such licences in public protection. This can only be approved at Cabinet, and all other aspects, such as hearings, will be dealt with by committee. The fees were set up following an in-depth assessment using the Fee Assessment Toolkit, which was approved and endorsed by Public Protection Wales to ensure uniformity throughout. This is highlighted in section 3.6 to 3.8 of the report, where a table of these fees can be found. The approval of delegation of powers is set out in 3.9 to 3.11 of the report. The recommendations are that we approve the fees set out in 3.8 of the report and approve the scheme of delegation set out in section 3.9 to 3.11 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sandals. Do we have any questions from Cabinet? Before we move to recommendations, I would like to thank officers who've attended Cabinet from Licensing Committee for the work they've put in to bringing this to Cabinet. It's very timely and necessary that we align ourselves. We have two recommendations, Cabinet. One is to approve the fees as set out in section 3.8. I won't read those out. And the second is approve the scheme of delegation set out in section 3.9 to 3.11. Again, that's on record, Nick. And do we approve? We do. Thank you. Thank you, Cabinet. Let us move then to real wage accreditation. Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to be able to bring this report today. I usually, having the finance as part of my brief, have to bring what is often difficult reports to Cabinet, but today is, I believe, a positive report. The real living wage is an unofficial hourly rate of pay overseen by the Living Wage Foundation. It's based on the cost of living and is set according to how much people need to earn in order to afford a reasonable standard of living. The terminology can sometimes be confusing. It's worth making the point that the real living wage is different to the national minimum wage and the national living wage, both of which are set by the UK government. Since this paper was drafted, all of these rates have been increased, with the latter two having been raised in last week's budget. From April 2025, the national living wage will increase from £11.44 an hour to £12.21 an hour, and the real living wage from £12 an hour to £12.60 an hour. This council has been paying its employees the real living wage for more than 10 years, going back to April 2014. It's also worth highlighting the Welsh Government commitment that all care workers in Wales are paid the real living wage. This has been implemented in Monmouthshire. However, we are not currently an accredited employer. To achieve this, we need to extend this commitment and put in place plans to review our supply chain and make arrangements so that people who are employed by our contracted third-party suppliers working on Monmouthshire premises are also paid the real living wage. Cynnal Cymru works in partnership with the Real Living Wage Foundation to support employers with accreditation. Subject to this paper being approved, officers will continue to work with Cynnal Cymru on the application process. The steps we need to take are set out in paragraph 3.4 of the report. Officers at our shared procurement service, ARDL, have already started to analyse our contracts register to identify the contracts that would be affected by this commitment and understand the potential cost. I anticipate having this information in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and at that point I will return to Cabinet with an estimate of the financial costs in line with recommendation 2.1. It's important to stress that this will only apply at the point that contracts are renewed and will not be applied retrospectively to any existing contracts. In terms of our own staff, scale points 2 and 3 of the NJC pay scale, which is £12.26 an hour and £12.45 an hour, are below the rate of the real living wage of £12.60. However, we have until May of next year to introduce the new rate, and this is something which needs to take into account as part of the national pay negotiations for 2025-2026. Following accreditation, the council can use the accredited logo and will be registered on the Real Living Wage Foundation's website. Most importantly, becoming accredited is consistent with the aspirations of the socially responsible procurement strategy we agreed last year and our priority to tackle inequality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Callard, and I can imagine it's a real joy for you to bring this to Cabinet compared to recent reports. But I also know this is going to be welcomed across Council because it really is embedded in the values of Monmouthshire Council and the way we treat our staff and residents. Is there any observation from Cabinet? No, but I know Councillor John has a question.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Leader, and Councillor Callard. Thank you for the report. As you know, Monmouthshire was one of the very first councils in Wales to pay all its staff at least the real living wage around a decade or so ago, and my group was very supportive of any proposals to build on that, but also to seek formal accreditation. But you must recognise that the additional pressures that were placed on small businesses in the Chancellor's budget last week are going to make it much more difficult for employers to actually pay the real living wage.
Thank you for your question, Councillor John, and thank you for your group support as well. I know we're building on work, as you mentioned, that you started in a previous administration. Regards to the question about the UK government budget, I think we've seen over the last, decade, nearly a decade and a half, that you really can't run strong public services on a shoestring, and we need to make sure that we invest in our public services. And if we invest well in our public services, then businesses can reap the rewards of that, from a healthy workforce where people can get seen in the NHS in good time without languishing on waiting lists, and also a well-educated workforce. You're right that there needs to be, a balance in that, but I believe that, my personal view on the UK budget of last week is that balance was struck correctly.
I note your response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor John, and thank you, Councillor Callard. And it's good to hear you endorsing this being taken forward by the Council, Councillor John. So we have three recommendations to proceed with the evaluation as laid out by Councillor Callard, to bring forward a further report detailing our plan, and subject to the recommendations from 2.2, the second recommendation, to pursue accreditation as a real living wage employer. Are we agreed, Cabinet?
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you again, Councillor Callard. Come now to item 6, the former Abergavenny Library. It's back to you again, Councillor Callard.
No, I think it's me.
I am sorry, it is you. Apologies, of course.
I've been absent for so long, I just felt I needed to make my voice heard in Cabinet again, in case you couldn't remember who I was. Yeah.
No, my bad. I wanted Councillor Callard to prove he was working after his holiday.
I think the old Abergavenny Library building is a much loved building in Abergavenny. It ceased to be a library on the completion of the Abergavenny hub. And the new library is obviously much more fit for purpose in this day and age. And subsequently, the Abergavenny Library has been used by the Pupil Referral Service. But as the needs of that service have grown, it is just not a suitable building. There's no breakout rooms. There's nowhere outside for the kids to go and play, and so on and so on. And so the decision has been taken to move the Pupil Referral Service back to the centre on Old Hereford Road, which does enable it to provide much more effective education. But the outcome of that, of course, is that there is this empty, characterful building in the centre of town. The one thing the report does not mention, that I always believe it deserves a mention, and why it's not a good place to be used for education, is that there is perhaps the most famous misspelling in Abergavenny on the opening stone by the front door, where the stonemason actually spelled Abergavenny with 3 N's. And that's been the subject of many a pub quiz that I've set over the years. It is the only.
My relatives, Councillor Groker.
It is the only place where Abergavenny is known to have been spelt with 3 N's. But that apart, the proposals quite simply are that there is no use for it within children and young people. And that it should be handed over to landlord services, who I hope will find that someone can come to love it again as a characterful building. There are limits on what it can be used for, and the report notes it can't be used as a public house or a restaurant, which will no doubt come as a great relief to the public house and restaurant that are next door to it. But it would be good to see a town centre building serving a positive community use. We hope that landlord services will be able to find such an organisation who might want to take it on. But I fear that it has not been the best base as an educational setting. And so we think it's best that it's moved on at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Grocott. I have a personal interest because I have a minor interest in Carnegie buildings, and the old library is a Carnegie building that was one of the bequests of Andrew Carnegie, the American multimillionaire who came from Scotland originally and gave this bequest across the whole of the UK of Carnegie buildings for libraries and other use for the public community use, and put that covenant on it. And sad to say, some other local councils around the UK have sold it off to private owners and turned it into luxury flats. I know one place in the north of England that's done that. And so I'm pleased that we are committed to that covenant and ensuring that it benefits our communities. So while it's good it's been used over the years as a library and then by the by the pupil referral unit, it's also good that we remain true to that purpose. Cabinet, is there anyone else with an interest in Carnegie buildings? Or
I feel I should gain once.
I'll bring us to recommendations. So we agree that the former library transferred from the Children and Young People portfolio to landlord services, and that the landlord services invite proposals for the leasing or purpose of the site in accordance with the policy objectives of the asset management strategy. Are we agreed, Cabinet?
Yeah.
Agreed, Nick. That brings us to the end of Cabinet. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, including the public online, and I look forward to seeing you at next Cabinet. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.